Hi there, I'm Jackie, and today I am going to be your host for the Perennial Plant Powerhouse Workshop. And I'm so excited to be here. I hope that you can take some time to grab some tea and a snack and get cozy while I introduce you to my 10 best plant friends. So let's get started. This workshop is all about creating your own productive backyard paradise with edible perennial gardening. Now, we all know about the familiar kitchen garden or annual vegetable garden, but there are other ways to really boost productivity in our outdoor garden spaces. And so I am talking today about the unsung or maybe sung heroes that if I had to choose 10 plants to take with me, if I had to leave my gorgeous garden behind and start all over again, these are the 10 of my favorite perennials that I would bring with me to instantly boost productivity in my new space. And so I would like to introduce them to you today. Just a quick rundown of what we're going to be talking about. I want to talk about the power and the value of including perennials in your garden. I want to talk about starting from seed and just the special considerations that you need to have when you're starting these itty bitty seeds. The good news being that they're one of the first seeds that you start in the spring. And then talk about the big picture and how you can really incorporate these plants into your existing garden spaces, even if you do have small spaces or already have gardens, or if you're starting from scratch, they'll fit into your spaces just fine. And then I want to talk also about pollinators and our bee friends, because it is so important not only to be creating garden spaces that work for us, but work for the entire environment and all its inhabitants. And like I mentioned just briefly, if you have a small space or you're looking at patio or container gardening, then there is absolutely ways that you can include perennials into that space as well. So I'll talk about that. And last but obviously not least, we're going to talk about harvesting and what ways or little special tips and tricks I have to harvest and eat the fruits of your labor. So before we get too far into the what, where, and when, and how of all of these things, I want to talk a bit about the why. So close your eyes for a second and picture this. You've had a busy day, you're coming home, and you have to make supper. But instead you think, oh, I'm just going to go out to the garden and check what's happening before I do that. Next thing you know, 30 minutes has gone by, you've done a bunch of weeding, and you've found a whole bunch of things that have just come ripe. Maybe your elderberries have changed color and your tummy's full of them, and you've got a few in your hand, plus you've got your sprig of thyme, and you are so delighted. You skip back up to the kitchen, you throw that sprig of thyme in your 6 o'clock cocktail, and start to make supper, chopping up veggies and fresh herbs and smiling to yourself because of this brilliant green-thumbed genius that you've become. And so proud for this oasis that you've created. Now, that's the dream, right? That's my dream, and I know that's the dream of all my clients. And what am I talking about, clients? Well, not only am I a gardener with about 14 years under my dirty fingernails, but I'm also a certified permaculture landscape designer. So basically all that means is that I'm just a big old geek who likes to learn as much as I can about people's spaces, break down all the factors, what they want, what they need, all their hopes and dreams, and then put them together in a really cohesive and easy to follow plan so that they can finally start growing the garden of their dreams. And that's why I built this workshop, just to give you a quick rundown of my plant friends and give you some tips and ideas for how to really boost productivity in your own spaces, and especially for northern gardeners, fellow northern gardeners like myself, who understand the challenges of growing in a cold climate. There is certainly no shortage of information, good and bad, online about how to grow a garden. But the problem is that it's not always for us, the people who are growing, who know what winter is like, who have, winter snow boots up to their knees because they have snowbanks up to their knees, and shortened growing seasons. It's so hard to know if the tips that you find online actually apply to you. And like I said, that's my jam, is finding out what it is that's going to actually work in your space so that you can have success. So a lot of people talk about annual vegetable gardening, and I do too. I love annual vegetable gardening. Kitchen veggie boxes are one of my most favorite things in the world. But annual vegetables, just to give you a quick rundown, only grow for one growing season. Many live longer in hot climates like tomatoes, but in our northern climate, we grow them for only 1 year because the winter frost kills them. So like I said, examples are tomatoes, sunflower, spinach, those type of things. Perennials, on the other hand, are plants that come back each year and are planted in a permanent location. So generally annual vegetables and or annual plants and perennial plants are kept separately because the annuals, you're constantly reworking the ground, whereas the perennials, like I said, are in their own permanent location. They're great for garden borders, food forests, other outdoor spaces. And like it says here, perennials also make up the majority of our early spring food sources, which is a really cool thing to think about. Asparagus, rhubarb, strawberries, they all come from perennial plants because it takes a while for our annual food sources to really get going and start producing. Whereas the perennials, they come in the spring and they're rip-roaring ready to go. And so that's what we can eat early on. So if you want to grow your own food, but you're worried that it's just going to be way too much work, and you know that your grandma had a garden that she was out in every single day, and you know you just don't have the time for that, even though you'd love to be able to do that, may I introduce you to my little friends, the perennial, these perennial powerhouses, because they really do boost productivity while being super, super ultra low maintenance. Like I said, you put it in once, you give it a little bit of TLC, and it'll just keep showing up for you year after year. And there's nothing funner than walking out in your garden after all the snow's melted and seeing your little perennials poking their heads up out of the soil and thinking, oh, hello, old friend. I forgot about you, but there you are, ready to see me and to bring me so much joy and delight. So without further ado, let's talk about growing these little babies from seed. Now, I wouldn't recommend growing all perennials, even all of these 10 powerhouse plants from seeds, but the first two that I want to introduce you to, lavender and thyme, grow perfectly well from seed. So as early as mid-February, you can start these seeds in some sterilized potting mix. So I've got it here, and I'm going to just do a quick tutorial to show you just how simple it can be, because a lot of times people find that starting from seed is really intimidating, and I understand it totally is. There's so much information out there. But at the end of the day, it is as simple as getting some potting mix and some seeds and some water and just taking the first steps. So what you need to do is start there with soil. So like I said, soilless potting mix, it's funny because it's soil, but there's actually no soil. It's a mixture of peat, vermiculite, things that give nutrients, things that hold moisture, things that give a good consistency for the roots to really get healthy and strong in. And you can find this at any garden center, and a lot of grocery stores carry it as well. So you want to make sure that your soil is damp, and then you're gently going to press the tiny seeds in using this fancy technique that I call the toothpick technique. Now, what you're going to do, it's very simple. You need a toothpick. And the little seeds, I wanted to show you how tiny these are. This is thyme. Can you see? Just how teeny tiny these little seeds are. So you could very easily go out and sprinkle these directly into bare soil in your garden. But to get a bit more control, I'm going to show you how to do this. So this toothpick technique, you've got your toothpick. You just dip the end in some water. This is just plain water. And then the water acts like a little magnet, and it picks up the seeds. So can you see those two little seeds hanging onto the edge of my toothpick now, just because I added water? And then I'm going to take my potting mix and push them in. And now there's no more seeds on my toothpick. It's like a gardener's magic trick. Anyhow, so then I just go back and dip again, pick up a seed, push it in, dip, pick up another little seed, push it in. And you can have, 5 or 7 or 10 little seeds that you plant in your mix. Then next, light. You want to make sure that you have a sunny south-facing window or some artificial grow lights. You can see an example of on this side, the grow light that I have. It's obviously not in use right now because there's a plant on it, but there are some great different types of grow lights. You can get fluorescent or LED, mine are LED, but you want to have good light. Both lavender and thyme like to have nice sunny locations. And then thirdly, water. Just make sure that you are keeping it consistently moist, not so sopping wet, but damp. And you can do that by squirting or misting on the surface. You don't want to have a big sploosh of water because it will dislodge your little baby seedlings. And then also have a tray underneath. Then you can just pour the water into the tray and then the soil will wick up the moisture from below. And that's really all there is to it. So I'd like to challenge you guys right now to just try starting a seed, whatever seed you want. I would definitely recommend lavender or thyme. They're a great place to start and they will reward you for many years to come. But yeah, just give it a go. It's really not that hard. Next, let's talk a bit about how all of these plants come together. So if you want to have your garden really thrive, you do need to make sure that you have a space that is suitable for the plants that you're planting. Excuse me. When a plant tells you that they need to have full sun exposure, you need to listen to them. Plants like lavender and thyme, and also my third powerhouse, coneflower, or echinacea, especially enjoy basking in the sun. So that's where you're going to get beautiful, vibrant blooms. They're really going to be productive for you. And they're going to bring all kinds of friendly garden creatures like this cutie little moth here that's sitting on his coneflower to your garden so that you can really enjoy it. So this is when I was thinking about the 10 powerhouse plants, I divided them into two little guilds. So ones that would do really well in a nice sunny spot in your yard. So those are these ones here, creeping thyme, lavender. Hascap is a shrub, a berry producing shrub, coneflower and rhubarb. And then if you have a more shady spot, I would recommend growing these guys, Lowbush Blueberry, Lady's Mantle, a golden elderberry in the back for nice structure, Daylilies in the front, and then chives, one of my plant besties. But in addition to keeping your plants alive with the right sun exposure, you also want your garden to not just be alive, but to be drop dead gorgeous. And the way that you're going to do that is by layering your plants. So keeping in mind that you want to keep the tallest ones in the back, just like you when you were a kid and you had to do school pictures, all the tallest in the back, shortest in the front, so that everybody gets a nice view. And then also, more importantly, thinking about, well, maybe not more importantly, but more excitingly, thinking about different foliage types. So the flowers get all of the glory, but the thing that really, really deals with the meat of your garden is your foliage or your leaves. So even though flowers are pretty, it's the leaves that do all of the work. And so it's really important to think about them and give them special consideration when you're planning your garden space and where things are going to go in your landscape. Elderberry, for example, these golden elderberry, they have these beautiful leaves that have a kind of a limey tinge to them. And I feel like it really sets off beautifully next to this lady's mantle. You can see in the image here, this is lady's mantle leaves. And it's this soft green round leaf, really, really dynamic. But then the flowers of the lady's mantle are like this bright limey green again. And they just come up, they're so delicate, and they just almost float above the kind of low-growing mound that the lady's mantle is. So playing with this, different types of foliage, different types of green, and incorporating them throughout your space really brings things alive, even when they're not in bloom. And then in kind of on the other hand, during the fall and into winter, you want to be planning things like this. So what color are their leaves in autumn? How do they look in winter? And then trying to disperse these really vibrant pops of, for example, red leaves in autumn not all clumped into one spot in your garden, but having them throughout so that it really punctuates the space and you get a really lively, energetic landscape all year long. An example of one of these powerhouses that has the most incredible autumn foliage is the Lowbush Blueberry. They get such brilliant, brilliant red. And so yeah, we wanted to talk about not only our delights, but the delights of the whole ecosystem and all the critters that are living in your space, that are coming to visit your space. And so if you want to bring all the bees to your yard, we need to create an all-day, all-season flower buffet where they have plenty of different sources of nectar. So you want to have plants that have staggered bloom times to keep the pollinator friends coming back. So once they come, they say, oh, this is a spot to come, and then they keep coming back to see what else you have for them. This is where I'd like to introduce you to the powerhouse plant Hascap Berry. It's a bush. It's also known as Honeyberry, and it grows even in very, very cold places, zones 2 and 3. It was developed in Saskatchewan, actually. And besides the fact that it produces berries in places where other plants like blueberries wouldn't produce berries, wouldn't even survive, the Hascap berry is incredible because it has its blossoms come super, super early, and the bees absolutely love them. So it's a really great early spring source of nectar for your pollinators. And like I said, when you've got pollinators coming, they come for the flowers and they stay for the fruit is what we want to happen. So we want them to be pollinating our productive plants. And to do that, we need to encourage them to come by growing things that they really love the most. And all this that I'm talking about is a technique called companion planting. Now, companion planting's gotten really popular in the past few years, which is awesome because companion planting is awesome. And it's great not only to attract beneficial insects, but also to deter pests. And it kind of does that in 2 different ways. It can confuse their senses by, kind of masking one smell that they would like with another smell that they dislike, and then they aren't sure that this is the plant they actually want to eat. Another way is by attracting predatory insects. So for example, predatory wasps or ladybugs that eat aphids. So you want to attract the predators of the bugs that want to eat your plants. So you have, you kind of trick the food web in your favor, I suppose, is the way of saying it. And then implemented properly, companion planting also increases your soil health. So there are different plants that actually boost nitrogen in the soil. They have all different kinds of connections that we're just starting to learn about between the root systems. And it really just provides such a beautiful symbiotic relationship throughout the whole ecosystem, under the soil and above it. And chives are one of my favorite perennial companions for many fruits, fruit trees, apple trees included, and flowers. So yeah, like I said before, chives are one of my all-time favorites. And no, I was going to say if I had to pick just one, but I'm not going to play that much favorites. But anyways, you get my point. Anyways, so let's talk about small spaces for a second. What are you going to do if you've only got a little space, if you're in a patio or whatnot? Well, as you can imagine, plants do a lot better growing in the ground where they've designed, where they were created to be and thrive. And there are a lot of factors. But if we pay attention to those factors and then try and mimic those natural spaces in our own spaces, then the plants tend to do a lot better. So growing in containers, like I just said, can be a little bit more tricky, but plants like the Lowbush Blueberry, which I just want to give you a little distinction. So Lowbush blueberries are also known as kind of wild blueberries. Their berries are smaller than the high bush ultra productive berries that you would get, like for example, from the grocery store, but their flavor is intense and they can actually be very, very prolific. They can also handle a little bit of shade. And so choosing between a low bush and a high bush, I find that the low bush is just a lot easier, does a lot better, and is more adaptable to different situations. So that's why I'm recommending it as opposed to the high bush. Anyways, So these Lowbush blueberries and these other perennials, as long as they would indicate on the little tag that they're okay for container gardening, all you need to focus on is a little bit of TLC. So what I mean by TLC is for T, thermal mass in the form of rocks and bricks. If you think about the earth and the plant being in the earth, the temperature down there in the soil doesn't fluctuate wildly. It's very consistent. So to try and mimic that as best you can gather some large stones and kind of place them in with your pots if you wanted to make like a little cluster of your potted plants, and then include in these large stones throughout at the base, or bricks or cinder blocks, whatever, something that's really going to hold the heat there to try and in some ways mitigate the fluctuations in the temperature. L, lots of watering and consistently. So the same as that we want to try and stop as much as you can the temperature fluctuations, you also want to be able to maintain as best you can a consistent level of moisture. So that just means that you have to be especially careful. Just keep an extra close eye on your pots and planters to make sure that they're not getting dried out, because they are losing moisture from the sides, from the top, and all over. And actually, to stop them from losing more moisture of evaporating off of the surface of the soil, then you want to try and include compost tea for fertilization and health of the soil to feed the plant, but also mulch, like I said, to kind of tuck it in and to stop that evaporation. So that's the C. You don't have the worms digging in through the ground and constantly leaving bits of nutrients for your pots or for your plants that are in the pot. So you want to be able to be adding that in gentle ways. I'm not saying to go and pour a bucket of chemical fertilizer on. What I'm saying is to look into things like compost tea or sea boost, and feed your plants a couple of times a year so that they do get those nutrients that they need to really produce for you. And just as a sidebar, these are productive plants. These are things that we're going to be eating, ingesting, putting into our bodies. So we want to make sure that they're healthy and they're good, because like, you know, they say you are what you eat. So yeah, another thing that I wanted to mention is that if you are just container gardening, it's tempting to just have one thing here, one thing there, and leave it at that. But I really want to encourage you to include as much diversity in different types of plants as you can. If that means that you throw two different types of plants in one pot together, one going up and one spilling out, then not only is that so pretty and beautiful, the contrast between the two plants, but it's also better, and it does incorporate those companion planting benefits that we had talked about earlier. So like it says here, diversity makes the garden go round. And now, of course, we save the best part for last, harvesting and enjoying the fruits of our labor. Just a few simple rules of thumb to keep in mind while harvesting edible perennials, like the last two in the Powerhouse, rhubarb and daylily. So we'll talk about shoots, fruits, and flowers, starting with shoots. When harvesting rhubarb, you want to make sure that you break the stalk off from the root crown. So you can actually see in this image here at the base, it's not cut off with a blade, it's been broken off, and that's how it comes off. If you do cut rhubarb stalks with a blade, then the little nub that you've left will actually rot, and it will damage the root of the plant and make the plant unhealthy, if not die. So you want to break them off, and then don't forget that the leaves of rhubarb are toxic, so you want to cut those off and discard them. Otherwise, chives and thyme and other herbs, you can just use a sharp knife just to cut off at the base of the plant, and then you've got your sprig, easy peasy. Fruits, thankfully, berries turn color to indicate when they're ready for harvest. So we've got our Hascaps, we've got our blueberries and our elderberries. And if you're not sure, you can always go ahead and pick a couple to try. Your face will tell you that it's ready or not. And if you wait too long, the birds will eat them all. So it's best just to keep an eye. And as you see that things are starting to get ripe, make sure that you're the first to the table. And then with flowers, I say here, you know, eating flowers can make you feel like a royal and a rebel at the same time. There's something a little badass about biting on a petal. And daylilies are one of my favorite edible flowers. And aptly named daylilies only bloom. Their bloom only lasts for 1 day, so you might as well make the most of it. You only live once, right? So if you only live for 1 day, of course you'd want to be the star of the salad. So I encourage you to pick away and throw those on your salad. Just a little sidebar that if you eat too many daylily petals, they might give you the poops, but I've never had this problem, so I just want to let you know. And elderberry flowers are also, if you want to harvest them, instead of waiting for the berries, or in addition to waiting for the berries, you can make a very delicious and delightful elderberry cordial or a simple syrup that's perfect for your cocktails. So now I've told you all of this information. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, but now it is time that we get our hands dirty. So I'm going to provide for you a list of the top 10 plants, my Powerhouse besties, and so you can download them and find ways to include them in your growing space. And I have a feeling that the 10 superstar plants might just not be enough for you. And if that's the case and you want to grow all the things, then I just want to let you know about Nested's Kitchen Garden Boot Camp. It's an 8-week course. It's an all hands on deck, you, me, and our garden fork taking over the world, or at least a very small part of it. And like I said, it's an 8-week course, and we're going through not only how to include perennials in your space, how to plan out your gardens, where to locate everything, but we also talk about annual vegetable and fruit gardening and how to include greens and all of this stuff, so that by the end of the course, you will have way too many summer vegetables and herbs to share with your neighbors. You will have fresh flowers on your kitchen table, in your bathroom, and by your kitchen sink. And also renewed energy and muscles because of all of the work and fresh air that you'll be getting from working outside. But I promise you, it won't feel like work. And lastly, you'll have the courage and confidence to keep growing for years to come and feel like you can finally be supporting this garden and this dream. And it really, really will be super manageable. And I've also, all of this is lifetime access. So if you need to go back, you're welcome to do it. So you can check out this course, this Kitchen Garden Boot Camp. It's at nestedgardens.ca/bootcamp. And if you need me for anything, like I said, by now you probably know that I am basically obsessed with helping other people grow their own food. So if you have little questions or big ones, if you've got a little quick plant idea that you need help with, or you live on a coastal property and part of your land is falling into the sea, which some clients unfortunately have that problem of mine, you can catch me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Pinterest, and on YouTube at Nested Gardens. And so I am so thankful that you've spent this time with me. I hope that you've learned some new things and that you are all fired up to get your hands dirty and get digging around in your garden. I hope that you include at least a few of my favorite Powerhouse plants into your garden this year. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to try my best to answer them for you. And I hope that you guys have a terrific day. Happy growing, and I'll talk to you soon.